because every major energy ambition, ladies and gentlemen, must also answer one practical question, which we've been asking for the last 3 days. Can it work sustainably? And then later this afternoon, we'll be concluding with the final reflections and the closing direction for the road ahead in a high-level session. That's the program we'll be going through today. But let's move on to the first session this morning. That's a session on public acceptance and community engagement. Norman, when the conversations on nuclear energy first came to Kenya, we had, Nuper trying to get a site in Kilifi. And that was where the conversation on public trust and acceptance really came out. Because there's a lot of mistrust and misinformation and disinformation that then leads to lack of trust. But nuclear energy often begins as a technical discussion, right? And so people wonder, how does it affect me? But very quickly, because no matter how long science is, or how strong or how convincing the science may be, people have to understand what's being proposed, why it matters, and how their safety is guaranteed. And so public trust here is a never automatic. Now, to guide this next conversation, allow us to welcome DG William.
With those 3 rules in mind, recognize, with those 3 rules in mind, recognize that your relationship with the public as you progress with any nuclear program is going to be fraught with complexities that you can't even anticipate. People will care about things that you might not even imagine. So it's not going to go perfectly. So just be prepared for that. In fact, your whole program should be based on the idea of reacting to things as they occur, as opposed to trying to plan everything up front. Planning is good, but plans almost never work out quite the way you think they're going to. And the public often is not a very homogeneous group. It's a very diverse set of people and interests, and sometimes they surprise you. Another thing that I've found over the years, and I'm going to give you a very specific example of what I'm talking about, is the people in the nuclear sector. And fortunately, you here in Africa, you don't have the nuclear culture that we have in some countries that have been around for 50 years. So you don't have the legacy mindsets that we do in places like the US or France and other places. But in the environments that I came up in, it's very common for people in the nuclear sector to view the public as people who don't know what they're talking about and who are going to ask a lot of silly questions that you don't have time for. That's the mindset that a lot of people have. And I want to give you a good example of this. So when I was an NRC commissioner, I went to a nuclear power plant that had some problems. The problem was that tritium had leaked out of the plant site and gotten into essentially people's backyards. And it was a long, contentious issue. Some of the properties had to be purchased by the utility, lawsuits, accusations. It got to be very political. It was very, very messy. After most of this had settled, I came to that plant. And I had decided to meet with the public. So we scheduled an hour for me to sit down with about 50 people from the local community to talk about this. And people were, angry, emotional, frustrated, but I took the approach of just listening to what they had to say. And I realized that when we were having the discussion, they were starting to ask questions that I thought were very basic questions. I remember one person asked, "What is a picocurie?" Now, this is a measurement of radioactive materials in, for example, groundwater. And so we have been issuing these numbers, a certain level of concentration in terms of picocurie. Well, these people didn't know what a picocurie was. So obviously we weren't communicating very effectively. So I decided that my team and I would stand there in front of these people and answer every question that they asked, no matter how strange, no matter how trivial it was. What's a picocurie? What's a groundwater standard? What is tritium? You know, and this is something that's been going on for quite some time. These questions are very basic. So 3 hours later, we finally wrapped up. And a lady who was a homeowner at the end of this came to me, and she shook my hand, and she said, I really wanted to thank you because you're the first person who actually answered the questions that we were asking. And I thought that was the most depressing thing I had ever heard. Because we had sent people from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission there multiple times and had multiple public events. And the idea that after all that time, these questions were still out there and they felt that their questions hadn't been answered was pretty sad. And I realized that we had a mindset issue. And this is sort of the lesson that I took away from this. And the lesson is, and I think this is the most important thing from everything you hear today, if you walk away with one thing, I will ask you to think about this. If you're working for the implementer of the nuclear project, if you're working for a regulator, if you're working for the government, you work for the public. They don't work for you. You are their servant. And if you aren't communicating effectively, it's not their fault, it's your fault. That's the way you should approach everything that you do in this area. Think about it always as public service. What is your job as a public servant, no matter what your role is, to serve the public? Think about how you would feel if it was your backyard that had tritium in it. Wouldn't you want to have people answer your questions? So that's the attitude you have to take to this. If you don't have that attitude, I promise you, you will fail. Because that is the lesson that we have learned in our member countries over the course of 50 years. And the reason that we have that mindset is that when nuclear began back in the 50s and 60s, it was very secretive. We didn't have to tell the public anything. Things happened behind closed doors, decisions were made, and then things happened, and the public almost never really understood why or when. But that's just not the way it is today, particularly in a country that's entering this field for the first time. So please keep that in mind. Now, for a lot more detail about how you should approach these issues, we're going to hear from Kelly. So Kelly, come on up and listen very carefully to this presentation because I think this will give you a very strong background for the rest of the conversation. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Distinguished officials and leaders, beloved dear nuclear colleagues, I have exciting news for you this morning. We're going to leave this beautiful space momentarily and go on a journey. I'm going to get you to travel with me up the beautiful, mighty Mississippi River, where my home is. So we're going to start at the mouth of the Mississippi, at the Gulf of Mexico, New Orleans, where there's the Waterford 3 steam electric station, a pressurized water reactor. Visualize the river, the industrial complexes that the Waterford 3 plant fuels, the exciting energy of New Orleans. And we're going to travel upstream a few miles, a few kilometers, to the River Bend station. River Bend is a boiling water reactor. It's been in service about 40 years now. And then we're going to go from Louisiana, where those two plants are located, up the mighty Mississippi to the Grand Gulf Nuclear Station. Grand Gulf is a mighty, mighty BWR-6, the largest in the world of that particular reactor design. It's actually produced more electricity in its history than most plants, most of the 450 plants around the world. Grand Gulf is in the top 10 because of its size, 1,400 megawatts, as well as its capacity factors, its ability to put those megawatts on the grid, which is the ultimate goal, right, that we have. Fantastic plan. But I'm actually going to take you a few kilometers north of Grand Gulf. And Grand Gulf, by the way, is where I started working 40 years ago. And I live in Warren County, Mississippi, Vicksburg, Mississippi. For you American history buffs, you'll recall Vicksburg being the turning point of the American Civil War in 1865. It's a rather small community. Many of the residents of Warren County, Mississippi, in fact, work at Grand Gulf Nuclear Station. And in November, we announced a $3 billion data center to be built there on mighty Mississippi, just north of Grand Gulf. And Grand Gulf was one of the reasons that Amazon Warehouse Services, AWS, chose our community for the location of this $3 billion facility. Now, I also serve in county government, and so I'm particularly excited that this $3 billion data center is going to add $15 million annually to the tax base at our county. Our county is about a population of about 40,000. We have an annual budget of about $50 million. So $15 million a year is a substantial increase. This is exciting news, wouldn't you say? So this announcement was in November. What do you think the public in my community, the reaction to this big announcement has been? Positive? Negative? Neutral? Largely, the voices we've heard are concerned, primarily young people, a few older generation, but primarily residents in their 20s who've done a lot of Google searches about data centers. And what we're hearing as a public official is the fear and the concern. They are certain that the noise from this data center is going to create Alzheimer's, or that the consumption of water is going to contaminate the water supply for everyone. They are certain that electricity prices are going to double for residents there because data centers need so much electricity, right? And why am I telling you this story this morning? We're not here to talk about data centers, but the experience that I'm sharing is a similar experience that anyone in the industry for any period of time has seen, has felt, and as DG Magwood was just saying, you can anticipate. You have to be nimble, you have to be able to react. The best way to be able to react is to anticipate. So these examples I'm sharing are important to us as we put it into the context of what we're doing. Now this week, the conversations have been very diverse. We've talked a great deal about nuclear science and technology, the science of nuclear, the science of continuous improvements in the technology. But this morning, what we're going to explore is a different facet of nuclear science, and that's the social science, the people side. Now, we've heard stakeholders for 3 days now. I think gone are the days that we have to convince anybody that stakeholder engagement needs to be a part of your energy policy development. But we're going to begin today by just touching on a few of these concepts. Why engaged in the first place? As DG said, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when the U.S. nuclear industry was in its infancy, and it wasn't, I don't think, deliberate, the secretiveness that you touched on. I don't think that was intentional to exclude the public. It just was an afterthought. It was scientists doing what they do so well, right? Doing their evaluations, their analysis, making their decisions. What does a farmer in Warren County matter in our decision on what technology to choose, for example? But in doing so, and failing to engage, they lost this opportunity, similar to what I'm describing, that still exists today, to accelerate the positive, the support, the understanding, the visualization of benefits from your nuclear project, to tamp down on the possible opposition. As DG said, not everybody is going to agree with you. You are always going to have some who are fundamentally opposed to nuclear energy, or just somewhat opposed because of what they're hearing, or just not sure, and truly just full of fear. But an effective stakeholder engagement plan, in addition to bringing along the public into what you're doing, a key concept here is that it demonstrates accountability for everything you do that's not necessarily in the public eye. When you involve them in some aspects of your program, it offers reassurance for the vast repertoire of activities that they'll never even know about, but that you are successfully managing and handling. And I will say that when you have an effective structure for stakeholder engagement, it also strengthens your resources for all other aspects. Think about emergency response, for example. You plan for the worst, hope for the best. You have a very dedicated emergency response organization, but ideally a plant, even like Grand Gulf, that's been in operation now for more than 40 years, you don't often activate that emergency plan. But having effective communication systems makes you stronger, for example, in that area of emergency response and other areas as well. But there's a challenge with nuclear, right? It's just not fair. Why do people assume the worst when it comes to nuclear? Norman, I think on the very first day, one of the first things you mentioned when we kicked off here was negative connotations. That's the first assumption here. We think we're starting already from the beginning behind, right? And there's some reason for that. We know, and I love this quote, that we live in a society very dependent on science and technology, and yet a lot of people know very little about science and technology and don't want to know a lot about science and technology. They want the reassurance that you are the experts and you are taking care of them, right? Some of the concerns that they have are rational, right? There are technical challenges. DG Magwood, you mentioned some of these challenges on day one. And we know that there are those challenges, which gets back to anticipating what are those concerns going to be. But some of those challenges are political in nature. They're solvable, right? Or they're emotional. They make no sense to the scientist why somebody would be fearful of something that they don't need to be afraid of. But you can't tell somebody, don't be afraid. You can tell them, here's what I'm doing about that issue and to anticipate it. Some of those issues are just hypothetical, they're just potential, but plans are going to go awry. You are going to have issues in your program, whether it's the decision-making stage, whether it's the construction stage, the operation stage, things are going to go wrong. So we've learned over the years that the absence of stakeholder engagement is not the starting point that you want. These are just a number of the many examples in the history of nuclear energy globally where the absence of stakeholder engagement caused negative impacts. The photos on the left here are from Yucca Mountain, Lilco. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the construction of the Shoreham nuclear plant. Never put a single megawatt on the grid. That plant was fully constructed, billions of dollars. Do you know why they failed to get their operating license? Lack of an emergency plan. They had not engaged the public in the assurance that if there were an incident, they could safely evacuate Long Island, and thus the plant in a negotiated political settlement was shut down, and those ratepayers of the electricity company paid for that plant over a 30-year period, and it never put a single megawatt on the grid. The one in the middle, that's the Grand Gulf Nuclear Station where I started working, and that red circle is a plant that doesn't exist because in the 70s, when U.S. nuclear plants were being constructed, The costs went up, the schedules were delayed, the designs were redone over and over and over, and our company had invested billions of dollars and in a negotiated political settlement agreed to eat the cost of the not completed Unit 2 if the opponents would agree not to take us to court over the prudence of Unit 1. Okay, so a plant here that could have existed doesn't exist. Now, the good news is, increasingly today, we see incredible positive examples of stakeholder engagement. Everything from U.S. license renewals. So many plants like Grand Gulf have already received 20-year extensions of their licenses and are contemplating already a potential additional 20 years. So the initial 40-year license potentially could be up to double, up to 80 years for many of these plants. We see support for license renewals. We see support, Diablo Canyon, the Mothers for Nuclear were formed around the concept of keeping that plant online successfully. We see support in Japan for the restart of nuclear reactors and amazing work in Sweden on their DGR. So these are excellent examples of stakeholder engagement helping us here in the industry. The Canadian High Commissioner, Joshua, said on Monday, he talked about their whole society approach. And that's one aspect in Canada that we see manifesting as amazing support, for example, for the work that they're doing in Darlington. So a number of examples of the positive. All of these go back again to the social science of risk perception. And this concept, this is actually an economics theory called bounded rationality. And what Herbert Simon said is that, yes, we are rational creatures, but what that rationality is bounded by our time, the amount of information we have, or our willingness to become experts, to absorb that information. And particularly with highly scientific topics like nuclear energy, but others, and especially when they're controversial, if we don't have the time or the information or the desire to really digest that, we form our opinion based on the opinion of others. And of course, with social media, there are plenty of experts out there more than happy to tell us what we should be believing, right? So we base our decision on someone else's. I love this, I'm going to share first this structure. Stakeholder engagement should be a very structured approach. This is a framework that I like to use because it touches on, and our panel today can highlight a number of these components of an effective stakeholder engagement strategy. For many, many years, we would talk about an issue back at my company. We'd say, we need to get out in front of this issue. What's our communication strategy? And you know what it always started with? It always started over there with communication channels. We need a video. We need a newsletter. We need a social media post, right? It always began with the channels. And what I urge you to think about in all aspects of your communication planning, your stakeholder engagement strategies, you must start with the why. What are we trying to achieve? And that changes. A stakeholder engagement strategy is very organic. It evolves. It's informed by how effective the previous actions were or what's anticipated in the future. And when you have the why, the other most critical starting point is the who, the stakeholders. Who are they? I assure you, as much as we would love to have unlimited budgets for stakeholder engagement, you will never have all the human resources, all the financial resources, or all of the time, the clock resources to be there for everyone. So a key part of your strategy is to consider first who your top priority stakeholders are. We'll touch on that again in a moment. What are their both concerns, but also interests? Again, we always go to the negative, the concern part of the equation, but they have interests as well. So how can we address what they are interested in our strategy, in our communication? The timing and who, the spokesperson aspect, who's the most effective in reaching those stakeholders. drives you then to how are you going to deliver that message to them. So I often think, I love American football, and I often visualize when I say that of the quarterback passing the football to the receiver, you know, and that visual of you've got information that's critical, but throwing it in their direction doesn't mean they necessarily catch the ball, right? So how do you plan a strategy that makes sure that football gets in the hand of your ultimate receiver? So looking at some of those, the first, as I said, is stakeholders. Who is it that you're trying to convince, if you will? You don't get to decide. That's the important part here. The stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in what's going on. So certain stakeholders may come in and go out. It depends on, again, where you are in the maturity of your program. You can see from the little bubbles here, they might be local, they might be regional, they might be global. Some countries, depending on where they're thinking of putting a nuclear reactor, have to worry about the international aspect, the neighboring country who might have outlawed nuclear energy, who knows? So you have to think about that, but realize the stakeholders, first of all, you have to do your research. And again, your stakeholder is not just the general public. That the general public is important, but there's a priority here of stakeholders. And so that leads to, and Eric, you mentioned, I think on day one, the stakeholder prioritization that you've already done here in Kenya, and I know a number of countries have, but thinking about all those potential audiences, all those potential publics, okay? And consider that spectrum of, first of all, interest. Are they even aware? Do they even care? Do they even know what energy policy is or why it's important? So many people don't realize energy infrastructure is fundamental to the economic growth of your country, and in fact, the political security of your country, right? Why does energy policy even matter? So interest is a spectrum, and impact. Some people really care, but they're not going to be decision makers. So as you prioritize, looking at this top quadrant here, those are the ones that you want to engage with in close and continuous work. But don't forget about the others. They're still a part of your strategy in dealing with anyone in these various quadrants. Then you get to the what do they care about? All of the little bubbles here look at some of the common benefits, attributes, if you will, of small modular reactors and really nuclear technology, nuclear generation broadly. But everybody doesn't care about all of these things equally or simultaneously. They come at it, your stakeholders come at these issues from very, very different starting places. And in our concurrent session yesterday, we spoke about these. Think about these almost like your deck of cards, and they're always in your hip pocket. But whether you pull out your diamonds or your spades in a particular situation at a particular time in your strategy depends on who those top priority stakeholders are and what really matters. And also what circumstances are going on around the world, some of which may have nothing to do with nuclear technology specifically. So for example, in the 2008 or so period during the global recession, for operating nuclear plants, the fact that we were providing jobs, that we had good payrolls, the economic benefits to a host community were very, very important. That becomes very different, for example, after the 9/11 attacks. One of those planes flew over our nuclear plants in New York, the Indian Point units. And so the aspect of robust design becomes much more important. How do you know that if a plane had flown into the side of that plant, we would have been safe? The aspects of energy security. Right now, energy security is top of mind of the public globally, right? And so all of these attributes, all of these messages are important to keep in mind, but you don't, there's a concept, a psychological concept called the delusion effect. The more you pile on with your messages, the more you dilute the impact of those messages. That's why it's very interesting. One study that looks at warning labels on pharmaceuticals, the more items there are in terms of potential harm, the more we disregard them all. And on the positive side, the more you throw all these messages, at the public, you lose the opportunity to impact them positively based on what their interests are and what their concerns are. So with stakeholder engagement, you want very much to know who your stakeholders are, those who have a high impact and a high interest, but also where their values are so that you can relate to them. And when it comes to messaging, these are the 10 infrastructure issues under the first program. All of you here are familiar with the infrastructure issues under the milestones approach of the International Atomic Energy Agency. The stakeholder engagement, actually, when I started working with the IAEA almost 20 years ago, it was stakeholder involvement. And it's also interesting, that's a good example how language changes, right? Stephanie, you're working with collaboration-based citing in the United States. That used to be consent-based citing. So the terminology changes and evolves, and this is a good example. Now we engage stakeholders, and that indicates a higher level than just involving them, and certainly a higher level than just informing them. One key principle here is to always think of your stakeholders as a dialogue, two-way. What do they care about? How do I know? And so forth. But stakeholder engagement here under the 10 infrastructure issues at first, I just show is very cross-cutting. So any one of these topics we've talked about this week, whether it's regulatory, licensing, technology selection, site selection, supply chain robustness, certainly capital convince anyone. When it convinces anyone, when it's a highly emotional issue, and data is so prevalent today, I could just pull up chat right now and ask a question about anything, and it's going to tell me, right? And it's going to be perfect information. And then even if I'm concerned about whether to vaccinate my children or whether to, take an international flight, no, it doesn't matter what the issue is, that data is going to convince me, right? No, this is a classic from 1954. Statistics can be used to support any argument. So statistics do not convince anyone when it's a highly emotional topic. I think it was Seth Maddox. I was looking back at my notes. You made the comment about safe technology alone is not what we're after. And I thought about that last night when I was considering the use of data, because that's an example. We all know how safe the technology is, but that alone and the data to support that is not going to be what is going to convince. I love this case study. I don't know how many of you, there's a TED Talk. If y'all like TED Talks, this is from 2013, so you can look it up later and hear the entire TED Talk. But this came from an experience of a company called O-Power. And in California, they were trying to convince the public to reduce their use of electricity. A very classic strategy of energy planning is to not have to build new plants and the cost of doing so, the capital investment of new generation, by getting people to conserve electricity. And so, in particularly, again, in certain periods of our history, energy conservation was a key message. So in California, they were experiencing a lot of rolling brownouts and risk that they were in having to buy off-grid power and so forth. So they did a study, and they had these hang cards. We're going to test the message. You should conserve electricity because by setting your thermostat at 76 Fahrenheit instead of 68, whatever, you're going to save $54 a month, right? The economic argument. And then for another control group, they tested the message, reduce your use of electricity because it's the right thing to do. You're going to save our planet. Environmentally, if you use electricity, here's what the numbers say. And then the third message is very practical. You don't want blackouts, right? You don't want brownouts. And you can prevent that because if everybody joins in here and reduces their use of electricity, none of these had an impact. They tested these messages. They tested the use of electricity then. Did it go down? No. You know what message resonated? Actually created a reduction in the use of electricity. You should put these little hang tags on the doors. You should reduce your use of electricity because 77% of your neighbors did so. Join them. So the power of simply doing something because that's what others do was far more influential than economic message, practical comfort message, and so forth. The point is, and that gets back to stakeholder engagement and your advocates, your spokespersons. What do people care about? Michelle, you mentioned this morning disinformation, misinformation, right? That's another aspect that's a flawed assumption. We get so upset. A flawed assumption also is that that misinformation only comes from bad actors. Now, the good news is there's so much misinformation out there today, nobody believes anything anyway anymore, right? And that gets back to the use of data. You know, people have become more and more and more skeptical of so-called experts. Today, all you have to do is start a blog and you don't even have to keep it up. You know, do it for a couple of months and now you're an expert in that topic, right? And so people are very skeptical of self-proclaimed experts. They're very skeptical of the numbers. Misinformation, you just got to deal with it, anticipate it, stand firm, have your messages, very, very brief, very, very basic messages. Have them out there, but don't worry so much about, again, you don't have all the human resources to chase all the bad information that's out there. You have to cherry pick where you're going to respond to some of these messages. That goes back to the little story I was just telling about data centers, right? It's not just in the realm of nuclear energy. It's in the realm of everything, the misinformation. And you know what? It's really interesting. So I went to one of these public forums last month, and young lady, 23, who's galvanizing the public to oppose this $3 billion industrial development. She'd done a lot of Google searching. And that's fine, and that's good, and I applauded her for trying to be informed in her opposition to the data center. However, one of the problems is, once it's out there, it always exists. So again, in the realm of data centers, as an example, if you do a little Google search about noise impacts, some of it's true, but it's also old data. So, for example, what happened in West Virginia 5 years ago, Amazon's already learned from. They have noise abatement, they've got noise monitors. In other words, their acoustic engineers are already addressing these former and old issues. Or they come, oh, this is also interesting, they come from examples of other companies building data centers. So, as I said, this is an Amazon AWS facility, and they're pulling information from Meta's construction projects, and so they're mixing apples and oranges to some degree, right? And that's one aspect about information and what's out there. It doesn't make it necessarily contemporary information or accurate to your particular situation. So when you think about a basic risk communication model, because that's what the science is that you're all dealing with, is the science of risk perception. You have to know that facts are good to have in your back pocket. They support your arguments, they establish credibility, but facts alone do not convince anyone. You also, back to what DG Magwood said about anticipating and being able to react. You can never, your program will never be perfect. So what you're planned for is, how are we going to address those unanticipated events? And even when something gets elevated to a level of significance that really isn't. A number of years ago at our nuclear plant in Arkansas, for example, there's a vessel called a tilt pit, and there was a slight overflow of liquid that was in this tilt pit, okay? And it was slightly irradiated fluid, little puddle of water on the ground, and our maintenance guys just came in, cleaned it up, far below the threshold that it was even reportable to the NRC. It was a non-event from an operations standpoint, but nothing to be concerned about, okay? But there was a brand new reporter in that little town where Arkansas Nuclear One's located, and she heard from a neighbor that they had this spill of this radioactive liquid. So she called the local mayor and said, does that event, does that nuclear accident concern you? And he said, nuclear accident? What are you talking about? And so that goes back to what I said about the strength of your program. When you have a robust network for communicating, and as a result of that, we ended up with a week of media coverage about not keeping public officials informed of significant nuclear events. And again, from an operations standpoint, it was a non-event. So what we always would say to our operators is, it doesn't matter if it's NRC reportable, if it's New York Times reportable, your communication staff needs to know about it. You need to have a mechanism for sharing information so you anticipate. And now we know who calls who. You pick up the phone, you say, governor, mayor, whatever it might be, here's what happened, here's why you don't need to be concerned, here's what we're doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. These are all aspects of a risk communication model. And the third there is incredibly important, and we've done tremendous research in the United States, and this is an example globally of who is trusted when it comes to spokespersons. We so often think of spokesperson in terms of the senior official, a CEO, a president, a director, people by title of authority. And that's true that they are very legitimate spokespersons, but the credibility by these different categories differs greatly. So this comes from an annual survey. Edelman is a global PR agency that every year produces the Edelman Trust Barometer. It comes out about this time of year, and it's out there online. You can read the full report. It's fascinating. But every year they also show, so the little circles here show the change from the previous year. Almost always, look who's at the very top, scientists. You people here in the room are the most credible in talking about the science of nuclear energy because you are either scientists or you're teachers, educators. So capitalize on that, right? And train those in your organization to be effective in speaking. Citizens of my country, my neighbors, so the employees, your fellow, your worker level employees are very important. And that's why part of your stakeholder engagement strategy is to make darn sure you're sharing internally the same key messages that you're worried about externally. Government leaders, journalists, those are at the low end of the spectrum. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not out there with messaging. You have to work with them, but understanding who is most effective in speaking with your various priority stakeholders is an important aspect of a very, very robust. And I have that caveat up at the top there. This is a global study. The circumstances could be very different depending on their political structure. The respect for the president, for example, in some countries is incredibly high, where in others there's none at all. So it does differ by your circumstances, absolutely. But still, it's important it's an important reminder to keep those circumstances in mind. And this goes back to that first grid. So there may be some of those out there who don't necessarily have decision-making authority, but they have a lot of interest in the topic. And so those, back to that, what is your action, keeping them informed becomes very important because they may in fact be spokespersons and you don't even think about them as being so. So what are examples of that? Educators. Think about who your possible partners are in your stakeholder engagement strategy. Educators are key, right? Not only because we're all worried about workforce development, human capacity, and so forth, but also educators are very credible. That's why the BBC, NPR, when there's a top story, who are they always interviewing? The professor at X university, right? And so thinking about educators in terms of what they can do to support your program, their credibility, what the public cares about, they can be a very important ally. So can media. We often think of media just reporting the big news, right? It's a 24-hour news cycle. They have a lot of objectives. Some of those objectives are things like entertaining, right? So how can you make this story sexy and fun? I mean, the work you're doing is difficult, but it's exciting, it's positive. And so how can you bring the human element? One of my favorite sayings, we had a chief nuclear officer for many years, beloved by the workforce, Don Hintz. And his favorite saying was, pumps don't run plants, people do. So the human element of what you're doing is critical. Great example. One of my favorite examples of stakeholder engagement was in Indonesia. They were doing some site selection work, some site criteria work. And the young man who was there to do soil samples, He was going to be there for about 3 months or so. He could have stayed somewhere down the road in a conventional hotel, right? And instead, what he did was he asked the chief fisherman of the village, is there a family here that might have a spare room I could stay in? And so he boarded with this family, and so he became a part of the family. And so from the very beginning of that program, the locals there, the villagers, saw nuclear as this person. They put a face on it. It became somebody they could trust. And that's a takeaway from this morning. What you're doing here is building relationships. And so when you have good relationships with journalists, you know who they are. Those who really want to get the story right. There was one for many years at the New York Times that we knew no matter how negative the situation might be, there were always two sides to the story. So let's reach out to him because we knew the chances were far, far greater that he was going to try to show balance in his reporting because we had that relationship. He knew he could trust us to be honest about the not so good stuff that was going on, and we knew we could trust him to try to get the story right. So as you think about your spokespersons, it's important to think who can relate to those priority stakeholders. It may be professors, it may be business and community leaders, it might be women, right? There have been a couple of panels here this week that highlighted the role of females in the nuclear industry. I probably shouldn't say this, but it's exciting to me when there's a line in the washroom, in the ladies' washroom, because for many years in the nuclear industry, there was no line on the ladies' side, right? And so now we have, oh, something happened. There we go. So now we have a number of women who can talk to women, and that's why in the United States, we formed almost 25 years ago now, Women in Nuclear, which of course you know is a very global organization now, because women are more credible hearing from women, talking to women. We did some focus groups in New York after 9/11, and we referred to them as listening sessions. And it was just with women in coffee houses, tea rooms. What do you think about nuclear energy? And it was fascinating because no matter what the topic was, think back to my little bubbles, right? No matter what the topic was, for women, the message came back to safety. So think about reliability, right? The fact that having nuclear as part of your diverse portfolio makes the grid more reliable. Public doesn't care about grid stability. They don't know what that is. They just know they want the electricity when they need it. And for women, that translates into, I can remember one lady said, my daughter has diabetes and it's really important for her health and safety that I have electricity, that the refrigerator's working, right? Think about the economics. When you think about the full cost over lifetime of your different generation sources, yes, nuclear has a very high capital investment, but because of its long operating period, it creates stability for your electric bills, okay? For women, they said, yes, I'm in charge of the household budget. That helps me protect the health and safety of my family because I can predict my electricity costs. Every message for women went back to safety. And so it changed somewhat how we then communicated with those stakeholder groups. Young people, we're going to hear the next session from some representatives who are doing a lot to get young people involved. This is these two images here. You see the I Love Nuclear in the very top corner. That's Dylan at Texas A&M, who's a member of the student chapter. And in fact, I'm going in a couple of weeks. They're hosting a conference in College Station, and we're going to do some exercises in stakeholder engagement. So this is at one of those beloved American football game, college game day morning, millions of people on TV across the nation watching college game day before the big kickoff of a premier matchup. And that particular Saturday, Texas A&M was playing. Dylan got out there with his sign, and what's really interesting is how it became a repeat effect. The lower photo is at University of Michigan. They said, well, we're not going to let those Aggies one-up us. That spirit of competitiveness is something you can all rely on. In fact, I thought it was fascinating. I I'm curious to see in a few years if NIMBY, which is the topic, the title of this session, doesn't transform more into the concept of FOMO, fear of missing out. You heard what His Excellency said yesterday about Kalifi. They were on, then no, they're off. So now that you're over here at CIA, can we change our mind? Can we, now that somebody actually wants the site, maybe Kalifi's a little more interested after all. That fear of missing out is an important psychological element of what you're doing. And that's key when it comes to siting, your siting activities. Like the example here in Kenya, it was about 20 years ago that our company was going to build another large nuclear unit. And the obvious place to build it would be where you already have a plant, right? So you had a team of experts, of scientists, who looked at all of the data, right? Did multi-criteria analysis and narrowed it down to two possible locations. That boiling water reactor site in Louisiana, River Bend, or the one in Mississippi, Grand Gulf. But instead of choosing, we said to the governors of those two states, tell us why we should come to your state. And so it became a competition. And so, then what you saw in the public from your leaders was begging us to choose them, not complaining that the decision was foisted on them. Very important psychological dynamics. But this comes from Edelman's Trust Barometer 2 years ago. The topic was communicating science. And across the globe, you see that the result was, as trusted as scientists are, they don't know how to communicate with the public. So it's imperative that you train those spokespersons. And that's some of what both the IAEA and the FIRST program offers workshops in training. And again, it's not just your communicators, it's not your public information officers exclusively, it's how do you train, for example, your partners, some of these other effective spokespersons we've talked about. I throw this up here. We've done extensive research only to remind you to be very careful in knowing what you think you're saying is not necessarily what your public is hearing or visualizing. The very first example here, nuclear power. Now, I'm not going to propose that we can eradicate entirely the term power from everything we do. But the more you use nuclear energy, nuclear energy, what the public hears when they hear power, what they visualize is pow, right? The colors they associate with power is red, orange, explosive. That affiliates, that goes back to military applications of nuclear technology, right? When you say energy, oh, energy, that's kind of blue, green, calm. Who doesn't want energy? How can energy ever be considered a negative concept, right? So knowing very deliberately, very intentionally the words that you use. You're going to get questions. What about the waste? When you think of the key common questions, what about the waste is one of the top items on the list. Just because the question says waste doesn't mean you repeat waste. You never refer to it as anything other than either used fuel or spent fuel. There's one advocate who contends that we should be calling it unused fuel because it still has energy potential in it. So thinking about the words that you're going to use, new nuclear, it's so easy to say, right? But new brings up that fear of being first of a kind. Call it advanced. It's not really new. It's an evolution of 70 years of operating experience around the globe, right? So advanced nuclear or evolving technologies always test better. Even SMR, I put that on there because we were in a workshop, but we did some training for journalists in Ghana last year. And everything was all about SMR. And one of them finally said, what is an SMR anyway? Y'all keep talking about SMRs. So be very, very careful with your acronyms. And modular, while we love that concept, and yes, it's a powerful, powerful aspect of the safety of the next evolution of nuclear technology, just call them small reactors. And then people get it. They know what small is, right? And so thinking very intentionally about your language is another important thing. These are actually some of the villagers in that community in Indonesia that I was talking about. Those 3 young ladies, they're ready to form a women in nuclear chapter in their village. So think about, again, the fact that you are not alone. This is a global enterprise with decades of experience. the bad, the ugly, but also the very, very good. And so learning from that, leaning on the best practices, one of the hallmarks of nuclear energy is operating experience, the WANO examples that we've heard from, sharing that experience, learning, and actually even engaging experts at every phase of your program. I heard the CEO of RoPower, for example, was speaking at a meeting recently, and he talked about that concern. Do we really have the workforce capacity to run a nuclear program here in Romania? And he pointed out, this is a global community. We'll bring in the experts from anywhere. They don't have to have citizenship to be important components of our strategy. So again, anticipating those questions, anticipating those concerns, but relying on the strengths of what you have here. Just a reminder, you do have to then pass the football, right? Deliver those messages. So thinking about how and when you deliver those messages, the key takeaway there is they must be two-way. They must be multifaceted. Not everybody, believe it or not, is on Facebook. So you need to be everywhere at all times. And that's part of the challenge really with communication technology. There's so many options out there. Gone are the days that your little local printed newspaper is the only way you can communicate. And then I'm going to wrap up by touching here on public opinion research. Why is that so critical? Every element of your strategy is informed by research. And I've shared several examples here, whether it's who your stakeholders are, what they care about, how effective your messaging and your language is. Every aspect of your program is informed by research. It's important to know what real public opinion is. It's always amazing how the assumption of opposition to nuclear is there when there really is not as much opposition. It's also important to illustrate how it changes over time and how effective your strategy actually is in changing. So the good news, if your public support isn't exactly where you want it to be, then the good news is it can only go up, right? And so you see that in the US. We've done the same survey since 1983, so more than 40 years now, with essentially the same questions. We've adapted over time, but you see here how it's changed over time. But what's really fascinating is year after year, no matter what the support is, if the public says, for example, in 2021, 76% of the public says, I support nuclear as a way of producing electricity. Then in the very same survey, when you ask them, what do you think the majority of the public feels, it's always 15 or 20 points lower than reality. So public opinion research can be very effective in demonstrating to your decision makers, your top stakeholders, how the public really feels about nuclear technologies. Also, it can help be a powerful reminder that you're going to have some who are going to support it no matter what, some who are going to oppose it no matter what, but you really have this, what I call fence sitters, these people in the middle, and that opinion changes, again, based on your actions, your reactions, and what's going on in the world around you. So, implementing a stakeholder engagement strategy, I'll recap by saying it's evolutionary, it's continuous, it's constant, it's ongoing, it's informed by research. You never communicate and you're done, let's go home. You constantly have to develop and evolve your plan. Because ultimately, yes, we want licenses for our designs, yes, we want licenses for our operations, but you also want social license. And DG Magwood set this up by mentioning information. We want to make sure our audiences are well informed. But I assure you, they're not going to take the time to learn about this highly scientific topic if they don't first care. You have to start with the heart. What are their values? What do they care about? And how do I pull that out of my deck of cards, the attributes, the positive benefits of nuclear, so that opening their hearts opens their heads, ultimately gets to the actions, their hands, their advocacy, or their lack of opposition. So thinking about this model, the heart, head, and hands approach, I think is key to your stakeholder engagement strategy. With that, we're going to have the panelists join us and spend a little time answering questions that you might have about stakeholder strategies. Y'all come on up in a variety of countries. And DJ, I think you're going to facilitate us.
So panelists, please come up. So Patricia Didi, please, from Nupia, Yanni Hoff from KINS in Korea, Alana Gerard, Victor Qua from Nuclear Power Institute of Ghana, and Fabian Hubert from Andre, France. Please come up and have a seat. I appreciate Kelly's overview. I think that gave a very good primer on the whole topic of stakeholder engagement, and it certainly raised a lot of thoughts with me. One thing I think I would share is that one of the things that Kelly pointed to, which I think is very important, is the human element. You know, we've talked a lot about social media and all these other things, but in my experience, there's really no substitute for experts meeting with people, sitting in a room and having discussion, answering questions. I think that's so powerful. And you can, obviously, if you're talking about, you know, thousands and tens of thousands of stakeholders, you can't have, you know, a small focus group with everybody, but there's a multiplier effect of doing it. And people do learn about it. And I will tell you that even the fact that you do it is extraordinarily positive from a public communication standpoint. So let me ask each of you to make a few comments. First, based on what you've heard this morning from Kelly in her presentation, are there areas in your experience where you learn how these principles can be applied to specific activities? Can you give an example of where things either went well because you followed some of these principles or did not go well because you didn't? And what I'll do is I'll just kind of go down this path and start with you, Fabian.
Okay, so thanks so much. DJ Magwood. Yeah, so I have the specificity of speaking on behalf of a waste management organization. So we have some specificities that I should remind in waste management that, in fact, with our projects, we're supposed to dispose of waste that has not been produced on the territory where it will be disposed. So that topic that's particularly important regarding public acceptance. So a local issue, but of national importance, because the waste comes from all over the territory, and the time scale of the projects we're involved into. Because from the moment we start engaging in the process, the research we conduct, that durates decades, then the operation of the disposal facility, if we're speaking of deep geological repository, 120 years, so it's a very long-term process. And so, that being said, I'd like to share with you some experience we had with our projects, and especially the one with our deep geological repository. It all started in the 80s, the siting process, and at that moment, it was based on a purely scientific methodology. So we're not created at the moment, and investigation started. Not especially communicating with the territories, etc. And scientists started their site investigations. And that went pretty bad, in fact, because there was strong opposition. Yeah, some fightings, etc. And the government decided to put a moratorium on the project. So we started up again on new basis. Our organization was created, dedicated to the management of waste in 1991, and a parliament member was designated as a mediator. The mediation consisted of discussing with territories interested into hosting, to start with, an underground research laboratory. So we did reverse. We asked the territories. We had some candidacies, 4 candidacies. Then we led the investigation. We discussed with the territories, and especially at the very local level, because the candidacies were at the level of the districts, so not the municipalities themselves. And finally selected by government decision, one site. So that illustrates, I think, one important aspect of our specific project that needs the involvement at the national level, at the regional level, so the district, but also at the very local level, the elected official and the mayors, because, and that will be the occasion for me to share another experience we had in our project. Those are often very small municipalities, very rural areas that we're into, not necessarily having a history of nuclear energy, so they are not armed with the topics they face. And they need us to provide them with information, with the data, to guide them. So it's very important, because at another level, at another time in history where we had a project for a disposal of low-level waste, long-lived, we had the same process with candidacies, but at the level of those municipalities, not the districts. And problems came, because some municipalities were interested, but they faced with opposition, internal opposition, from their citizens, from their city council, from external opponents, and they all withdrew the process. So that's a process requiring the involvement of every level. And coming to the citizens themselves, of course, they're not, that's not their daily concern, our projects. But we have some lessons learned that their level of interest is different according to the moment we're into in our project. So we are to continuously provide, and on a long-term perspective, information to them, and to tailor it to the audience we're speaking to. So that's what, and Dr. Barker spoke about that. We're mapping the different audiences we're facing, students, but even farmers, etc., and to discuss specifically with those groups of interest, because sometimes the topic they have are not necessarily technical or on the concern of waste itself, but on the disturbance that it will generate on their lives, on their daily life. So traffic, road deviation, traffic, change in traffic, etc. And you have to take that into account. And that's why also the contact with the mayor is very important, because they're relaying. There's some spokesperson you spoke about. We have daily contacts with them. They have our phone. They can call. At one point in our history, there was the fact that one of our engineers had designed one of our facility with the emergency exit of the facility right in front of the entrance of the village, and that was a problem for the mayor. He told us, first answer of the engineers was, "Oh, it's not possible to change it." But finally, we changed it because it was the main concern regarding that topic. So those are some of the topics I wanted to share. Sorry.
There's really one comment about that response, and it's really worth paying attention to. I think the framework of discussions that Fabian discussed were very specific to France. That might not work in all places. So I think you really have to listen carefully to these responses, because they are about specific cases, specific cultures, specific situations. And you have to adapt the lesson to the situation that where you're going to make the application. Yanni, please.
Thank you very much. Since Kelly touched all the details of all the consideration we can think regarding the public communication studies, so let me think what would be adding from my side for your consideration. The first of all, when I'm thinking as a the expert working in communication and by education and experience, I can tell that the phenomena of like not in my backyard should be reframed as not without my participation. So the public communication and acceptance should be reframed. It's not about really communication issues. It's about trust issue. It's about fairness issue in decision making, and it's about governance issue. So how we can make the best decision, not by me and not by you, and all together. That's the one of the things that we really need to keep in mind. But as you know, that the goal of communicating with the people is not just about delivering the information, but it's earning the trust. It's building relationship is not a simple and it's not built in a day. So thinking about the good examples that I can share with you, probably you will have a chance when you meet public stakeholders in your local community. Whenever we are exposed to the situation where we are addressing their concerns, sometimes it's beyond the nuclear. For example, in Korea, each nuclear power plant is located at seashore, and many fishermen are concerned about their fishing job because of the nuclear power plant. And they raised the issue not directly about the nuclear power plant, but their business. Since this power plant name is just named after the city, every product produced by name the city is heavily impacted. They were complaining about this, and they addressing their concern because it's very serious. And they decided, KHNP decided the name of all nuclear power plants in Korea. So it's another way of dealing with their concerns. It's another way of building the partnership to go together to build not only for nuclear, just power program and power plant. It's more like a building a partnership. And what would you like to add to the Kelly's really comprehensive communication, the slides? What you have to keep in mind as a country who are considering new nuclear power programs is about resources. Because as she said about whom you are targeting at, what messages you are delivering, and what channel you will be used. But actually we don't have a limited time, we don't have limited resources, and we don't have limited the material. So that way, as a leader in your room, I know that many of you are leader and you leading this important project, you have to prioritize your situation. So local community, building trust should be local. So you have to identify your situation first and to know that what the main things will prevent from faster actions. That way, in your organization, you should know which role will be what during the normal situation and abnormal situation. All the things should be prepared in advance in your own tailored communication plan. That will be great. But of course, as DG mentioned, plan is nothing, but planning is everything. Once you have a communication plan in your table, every time you have to revisit your plan to know that which part should be updated and which part should be more highlighted. It will be different, a longer term period, and depending on the different target audience, but it will be very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG, for the opportunity. And with your permission, I want to acknowledge the Ghanaian delegation being led by Dr. Abdullahi Salifu, everyone to this conference for which we are grateful. For us in this part of the world called Ghana, the experience with not in my backyard syndrome has to do with whose interest overrides the project that has been implemented. Most often you have government infrastructure projects that have timelines based on their vision and goals. However, the resources, key of which are needed for this project, are being held in the hands of the locals. So when you take a power project, as we had in Ghana, a hydropower project, the issue is in constructing that power project, whose interest is paramount. It is important that we find an alignment between the interest of the indigenes, who own especially the land and the key resources, and government that stands for the national priority. Most of the time, we've had an example in Ghana where a hydro project, we had the issue of resistance from the community, not because they did not align with the vision of the project, but they felt disrespected by their cultural practices and norms. The key issue had to do with resettlement, and these people were being asked to move from a place where they had lived many years, a place where they have identified with, a place where they call a home, to an unknown destination that has real fears and concern, a displacement of their socioeconomic activities. And as Kelly pointed out, it is important that total disclosure of information is given to all key stakeholders and as early as possible about what is involved in the project, the risk inherent in it, and most of all, what is in the project for the stakeholders. For a lot of the indigenes, what is in the project for them is paramount, and that determines their reactions or that approval of what you do. Another key thing that we must look at is our traditional land tenure systems and how we develop plans to balance taking it away from them, the ownership, and what we give to them in return. For most of the indigenes, most of the time, their engagement is presented as if you are doing them a favor, because the national government wants this project at a particular time. And therefore, what they have to say about the project is not too important. It is important you listen to them and get them to contribute to what they think they will need, and that would promote their interest in the project that is to come. In Ghana, most of our land tenure system is in the hands of the local chiefs. They own the land, they determine what goes into it, and they determine how it is used. And if you have to use a national policy that take away the land from them, of course, they're not going to just sit down and let you have it easy. So it is important that you lower the resistance from them by appreciating how they have preserved this land over the years. You respect their authority level as locals, and you involve them in the decision making as to the final use of the land. In the Bui instance, for instance, when the people had to be resettled, there was an issue of how to transport a local god. And for them, to their ritual, the god does not have to cross a river, but that god must be moved. The same spot of the god is the spot we need for the project. And there was fierce resistance. You cannot touch their god, more so let it move the river. And there were very serious agitations. Government could not come in, but they had to look for local mediators who had to sit with the people to find out how they can transport that gourd. Finally, the gourd was transported through a helicopter. It crossed the river anyway, but they thought that the distance in the sky to the river was enough for the gourd not to have any contact with it. The solution was provided by the locals because they've been given the chance. They were also made to feel that you are there for their interest, but not just to take the land that they have supervised over the years. Then they also have environmental fears and concerns. It is the case that very often displacement is not only with the people, but the very things that they work with. Their farms, their fishing tools, the way they do things, and the way they live. And again, you may want to look at the technology of the project and how it aligns with some of their natural practices that must evolve over time, with some socioeconomic benefit to them. In one of the nuclear sites we have, when we started the discussion of siting the nuclear plant there, most of them are fisher folk, where they sell the fish either processed through frying or drying. And the key issues that they raised after our first engagement was that, so what do we do with the fish that will come out of the sea? Are we going to still have our bumper harvest? Are we going to be taken away from our relationship with the water? And we said, no, what do you think you can do? If we have to be resettled, then we will need a program that unites us to the water once every year. And that is part of their festival. So in the discussion, they decided their annual swimming and boat racing carnival must be preserved, so that even if they are taken away, far away from the sea, once a while, they can still have that touch and unity with the water. Most of these things we talk about, it is because they are involved, because we engage them, we are very transparent with the information we give them, and we allow them to align with the vision and goals of the project that is supposed to be established within the community. Government is also important to see how, from the policy level, you manage some of these expectations. Kelly spoke about spokespersons, who it is who is saying what, and that is key. In Ghana, most of the communities listen to their traditional local leaders. And when they buy into a concept, it's easier to get the indigents follow it. And you are able to explain the issues to their understanding, and you get them following it. We have learned a lot of lessons from past experiences. And one of the key things we do is that we establish what we call local working committees, whose membership is made from the local communities, and they virtually act as intermediaries between the project owners and the community indigents. And you also have to arrange a redress system using the local structures, so they are assured that you are not only thinking about the project, but you have alternative conflict resolutions, and consent issues that would come to them. Balancing the vision of a project, a national project, balancing the interest, aligning the interest and the benefit must be holistically done so that it is not as if the owner or the winner takes it all, but that a national project must benefit the nation, but the indigents and the community and the stakeholders who have owned, who have supervised, who have preserved the natural resources that we use in developing this project also find space, also find hearing, and also benefit from the project that is done.
No, thank you very much. And I think that's a really important example to highlight, although I certainly hope that building nuclear plants is easier than building a hydroelectric plant. Let's get to Patricia, please. And I know that you've got some experiences to relate on behalf of the PIA, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, DG Margaret, and thank you, Dr. Barfield, for your very elaborate presentation that we, the panelists, could at least relate to given our own experiences. Now, back home where we are dealing with a community, an environment, a society that is very peculiar. And I just want to mention that even as we discuss our experiences and what we are going through, one size does not fit all. There's never one solution that works for Ghana, works for Uganda, works for South Africa, that will exactly fit Kenya. It is a learning process, and you pick bits and pieces and create something that fits you as a people, as a citizenry, because we all have our peculiar history, our own cultures to go by and to address. The same way you don't go to an optician when you're having a toothache. So you have to first scan your environment and understand, who are we? What ails us? What wins do we have? And then possibly now start applying a communication strategy, a multifaceted approach. Now back home, as you've all heard, we started with Kilifi, and now we are in Siaya. Not too good in Kilifi, but there were lessons learned that we picked up and applied to Siaya. And looking at that, we are dealing with a very well-informed citizenry. I'm sure in the last 3 days you have observed the conversations within the social media spaces, and trending at 1, 2, 3 for the last 4 days up until today is nuclear energy, nuclear for good. That tells you that we are dealing with a population that is very informed and relies a lot on social media and what happens in social media. So looking at that approach, it is a trickle effect to many societies. And I'm glad you looked at I call it the H-cubed approach, the heart, hands, and head approach. When we went to Kilifi, we were looking at a population that was very much aligned to myths and what they just had. And we were lacking, we were lacking leadership, goodwill from the leadership that was going to trickle down to the people. And these are people who look up to the leadership in many ways. There are cultures that believe that when you're a leader up there, what you say goes. And so from the very beginning, if that goodwill is missing, if that goodwill is lacking, not much is going to, trickle down. And that was one of the problems we had. And even the communication strategy, the stakeholder mapping, and the whole stakeholder engagement approach was really not, thought about in detail. So it was just application as you go. And that application as you go didn't quite augur well with it. And so Plan B was Siaya. Now, looking at Siaya County, you're looking at a population that are very much inclined to political opinion, the leadership, what they say, what is it in it for us as a program, as a project. They ask questions, and they're also, the education levels are also a bit advanced. So they're able to go into, the social media, they're able to go into Google, they're able to go to what happened at Fukushima or Chernobyl, all these things, and they will ask you and they'll demand for questions. Now, when you look at the environments, those are two different environments. And for that reason, the misinformation, disinformation now starts clouding the strategy that you want to apply. And even if you had a multifaceted approach to this, already the goodwill is lacking. So the beginning, the start is very important. And I keep saying that you never have a second chance for a first impression. How you start it, how you go about it, tells a lot about the delivery and how you end your program. And going to the stakeholders, we look at the national government, at the very top. And as you can all see, and you have attested to this, our national position has now been reinforced. And you can see everything that is of good needs to start from the top. And the national position gives that impetus for everyone to say, now this is where we are starting. The only issue with that we may, also just be a bit worried about is that as a country, we're also working towards an election year. And even as we, put out our messaging, we have to be very clear that this is not just one of those candies. These are not just a carrot being dangled just because you're nearing an election. We need to be very clear that this started not today, but this is a journey that started many years back. And we have to demonstrate that. We have to enumerate that. We have to indicate in our public education, in our awareness, in our advocacy, enumerating that journey up until where we are today, so that it doesn't look like it is just, something from the magician's bag and boom, here we are. This is a goodie for you. So communicating that is very, very important. And starting from the national government, looking at the three arms of government, engaging them, having these conversations, not as new pair, but looking at the stakeholders, stepping back and letting them have these conversations on our behalf. But they cannot have these conversations without having some, training, equipping them with what is nuclear energy, what are the benefits, why nuclear energy, what does it add into our energy mix. And going to the county government, again, the training here, the capacity building should be very, very rigorous. And this is putting them in, immersing them, nuclearizing them, as we say, in a modulated training from, safeguards, legal frameworks, how to communicate. And we always say in nuclear energy, you do not communicate as a half empty glass. It always has to be half full. And I'm glad you showed us this in your last slide where you say avoid some terms and some words, even as you communicate, even as you teach people. Avoid some colors. And I keep singing, and I'm glad you said this. Avoid the reds, avoid the oranges. You can have a very good program. You can have the best technology for your program. But how you communicate it, how you deliver it, means a lot. It can either make it or it can either break it. We are looking at the local leadership, and I'm glad Dana has also given the experience, which is very much similar to us. We have the Council of Elders for us in Siaya County. And moving across to the natives there, the Luo Council of Elders, and you know, the bordering counties, the Luya Council of Elders. These are elders, opinion shapers, opinion leaders within these communities, where the citizens, the host community, they rely on advisory from them. Is this a good thing for us? Is it a bad thing for us? And it's also important to note that there's a very thin line between these local leaders and also the political shift, the national political shift. So it's a very thin line. And you must look at this audience. When you look at audience segmentation, this particular audience, they also have a lot of weight in saying what benefits this community. So in the same way, they have to be equipped with the facts. And facts does not mean creating something in the clouds and creating a story, a fairy tale that one day somebody will put you to account and ask, but you said this. Give them the picture as they know it. Tell them what this is going to do for them. And also, when we went to Siaya for our very first stakeholder engagement, we spoke to the hearts, we spoke to the minds. We even went down and started doing these talks, these barazas, these community engagements in their local languages. There's something with people when you speak to them, it's not, I don't want to call it tribalism, but it is what it is. People want to ask you the hard questions. They want to ask you hard questions and ask you, hey, tell me, are you people bringing this to mess us up? Or are you coming to dump this just because, you know? And you need to speak to them, speak to their hearts. And this is what we were doing. And we were preempting these questions that they were going to ask on land acquisition, on waste management, on health. The myths were too many, as you heard the governor of Siaya County speak about this yesterday. And there are very many myths and, you know, propaganda. You know, it affects us. For the women, you will not be able to, you know, have children anymore. And the list is endless. And you have to go down there and give best practices, experiences of other countries, of other people. We even have our own staff some who have trained, you know, out there, and lived near nuclear power plants, and they're back and they're fit and they don't look like they're dying. And you say, here I am, you know. So real life experiences, getting to their hearts, getting to their minds. And it doesn't end with one stakeholder engagement session. You keep going at it. You keep talking to them and telling them about what other people have gone through. And this is a community that, you know, is a fishing community, the fisher folk. This is how they make the daily bread, how they live. They have for many years and centuries. That is how they have survived. So one day you tell them that, you know, we need this space and we need you to up and leave. And you can imagine, for generations and generations, they have buried their ancestors, their parents, their children, and you want to ask them to leave. So how do you go about this? And we have held hands with other critical stakeholders in this journey, such as the National Land Commission, who have undertaken similar projects. For example, the Standard Gauge Railway. How did they do it? What applications did they do? How are they going to handle this? It is more believable when you walk along with such stakeholders who are going to respond to such questions and give them real life experiences of how they go about it. What does our constitution say about such things? And when you do that, you're believable, because you're not talking about something in the cloud, but you're actually talking about something that is tried and tested, and with a stakeholder as well, who can take up these questions. When we look at that, we also have partnerships with the academia. This is also very important. And much as we are also, delving into developing our curricula for this, we are also looking at how best can we relay this message. How can we preach this gospel, if I could call it that, in a way that is listened to? Remember, nuclear energy is a very complex, very technical field, if I could call it very technical. So how do you move away from the technical jargon of the engineers and the safeguards to now synthesizing it to anyone? Tell it to me like you tell a playgroup child, like a 3-year-old. Break it down to me, make me understand. How safe is this? And if you go in there with the, SMRs and all these things, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose your audience. And before you even know it, they'll just go back to the street or wherever they were. So we have had this experience in CIR for our first stakeholder engagement. And going before them, before they ask you these questions, kind of went into their hearts, went into their minds, and they actually feel that you are being open and sincere. Because trust and accountability is very important in this journey. You may have the best of everything, as I keep saying, but if you do not earn the trust, if you do not have accountability and also inclusivity, by having these stakeholder engagement sessions, it's about inclusivity, mapping these stakeholders, working with them, making them understand is inclusivity. Otherwise, you will be taken as a dictator who just wants to mess up people, mess up their livelihoods, and you will lose it. I'm sure you've heard of nuclear power programs that, the power plant was built but never switched on. Why? Because the stakeholder engagement, there was no room for having this advocacy, having the awareness, and building a robust social license. And a social license, you can achieve that a social license, but you can also lose it in a day. So you also have to be very wary of, who am I not engaging? What are the challenges around? Remember, within these spaces, you have voices for some reason who just don't want this. And you have to run. Even as you're winning, you have to run, but watching over your back. What misinformation is being given once you do this? How can I make
Patricia,
it
can I
better?
ask you to hold on that point? Because I wanted to give the audience just a chance for a couple of questions. About 5 minutes left. Is there any last point you want to make? I'd like to open the floor. Questions, is a question here. So over there.
Thank you so much for this session. I'm from Germany, and we are reinsuring a world with nuclear power plants. Maybe some of you know me already. And Germany is a very, very good example how not to do it. Because we have had 37 nuclear power plants, I think one of the best in the world, I've heard, but they all have been shut down. What happened? In the beginning, nobody took the population with them, so nobody cared about, we will build up nuclear power plants, we have to have storages, and it was just under a curtain that nobody knows what will happen. So they built up nuclear power plant storages, and they didn't take the population with them. And then we had, I think, in Germany, the word activism was founded because we have lots of activists against nuclear. And out of this activists, also the Green Party was born. They are now in the parliament. And the activists said, no, we are very, very strong against nuclear. And this was the result. All power plants were shut down. And what is very important is, take your population with you. You saw in Cologne, I come from Cologne, and you saw everywhere. And these are the two words I have to apologize. I hate these two words. Atomic power, no thank you. Atomic power plants, no thank you. You saw it everywhere. And the second, so atomic. People think atomic is like atomic bomb. Very, very negative word. Call it nuclear power plants. And even our journalists, they call it atomic power plants, which is a very, very bad word for me. The second word I heard today very often was the word waste. And you also saw no radioactive waste. We don't want radioactive waste. So take the people to the storages, show them the containers, show them the casts, how it is packed, and call it not waste. Just call it used fuel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. There's
And
another question.
then you, sorry, one second word, and then you will have with these very clean power, nuclear, you will have your population behind you. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you. There's another question right next to it.
Good morning. My name is Kate Mavuti, a Kenyan lawyer working with Renew Africa Advisory, and thank you so much to the panel for your presentation. I just want to maybe put it forward to our Kenyan and Ghanaian panelists, whether or not you've thought about the idea of engaging in community development agreements with a lot of these communities. Because taking from lessons learned from other energy industries in Kenya, with the petroleum sector, there's a lot of, there was a lot of information and awareness creation within the communities, but there was not that acceptance from the host communities or where the operations were taking place. Contrast that with the mining sector in Kenya, where the contractors or the companies actually made it, they actually not just informed the community, but they engaged the community by looking at what developmental needs and necessities are within the communities and how can we help promote those. So just learning from the different other sectors may be of benefit, and I would like to hear maybe Ghana's experience on that, and also to our Kenyan panelists, if that is something that you have considered moving forward with community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. In Ghana, for instance, in one of our nuclear site communities, one of the key things that we really paid attention to is how does the nuclear plant being sited there affect the socioeconomic aspirations of the people. Some of the key things we have started doing, as I mentioned, most of them are fishmongers, and we have been able to move them from their environment selling points and link them up. In Ghana, we have the senior high school is free education. So the tuition and other things are free, but students have to be in school. And for the basic schools, they have one free meal a day. So what we have done to these local marketers of fish is that we have linked them up with caterers who produce or who cook food for a lot of the basic schools. And when they fry their fish, they are able to supply the district caterers. We've created a ready market for them, and that also helps them to increase their economic value and what money they keep in their pockets. We have upscaled that also to the regional level, where caterers who cook for the senior high schools have been linked up. So the fish that they fry has ready market, they get a better price for it, and they get also to engage in better negotiation as to when to get the fish ready and when to deliver it. Other things we have done include looking at the local skills of some of the people. We have a lot of the youth who are into welding, fabrication, and other things that they learn by the roadside. Thankfully, the US Department of State and the US Energy Department is assisting us with upgrading some of these skills, technical skills for the people. And we are also in discussion with our technical and commercial skills development, where we can have these skills upgraded. These are all initiatives we are taking as part of the community's preparedness to get involved in the project. You don't want where, when the project comes, those indigenes and these are young folks become road markers, they mark roads, they direct traffic, they do virtually the menial job. So we are actually providing them with skills that also helps them to set up little industries within their community, repair motorcycles, repair bicycles, and provide those technical needs within the community that improve their lives. But again, the key thing is, are the people ready for it? You cannot force this on them. So part of the discussion is their availability to be able to meet some of the initiatives that we give them. But socioeconomic development, not directly with a project, but directly with the development of their community, is one of our key priorities. Thank you.
Excellent. Patricia, quick comment on that.
Very quickly, for us, we are closely behind the Ghana program in terms of where they have reached, and so we are picking the lessons from them. But to us and where we are right now, we are, as I mentioned, we are working with the national government and closer to the host community, the county government. And the county government, we are working with Ngao, with the Nyumba Kumi, so that we are able to have the people understand what is in need for them. And also, this is a very good way where they're structured. And so you're not just speaking to random people within the community, but point people who are also recognized by the county government and the administration. So at that point, there's accountability. And to your point, what we would possibly look out to do is to have a corporate social investment program, not a corporate social responsibility, because responsibility, you just come and do something. And when you do this, it's like you're wooing them, and people become very, very suspicious of you. Are you doing this because you want us to do this? Are you giving us money so that we accept? So having a corporate social investment is important, not responsibility, corporate social investment, where as you plow into this community, it converts into a social license and acceptance so that you're able to move in. So those agreements that we look forward to having with the community is of course fashioned in such a way that there's a hierarchy within Ngao, the administration, the county government, and of course up to the national government, so that it is trackable, there's accountability, and there's trust as you go by when you're doing this. So even as you're having those agreements, you're not just having an agreement with anybody. It's very planned, and it looks what it is, and it's done through the elders, the local leadership, as well as the administration, and then we could have a monitoring and evaluation of this projects, of this corporate social investment. As you get in there, as maybe you get into a corporate social investment program with the Fisher folk, they know that this is something to benefit them. And even as you benefit, even as you do that for them, remember you are consistently going on with stakeholder engagement advocacy. That doesn't stop. Within the program, that is one element that never stops. It keeps going on and on.
Let me just quickly add that at the national level, Ghana has the local content policy backed by legislative 2204 of 2013. And it is not only to offer job or maximize job creation or information education, but value addition to skills and potential economic development of the host communities. So most of these actions also have national policies backing it. The same way we have what we call the Right to Information Act of 2019 at 989, that enjoys all technical institutions in the possession of information, technical or non-technical, to full disclosure. So you wouldn't say that because nuclear technology is a preserved of scientists, you would not disclose it. You are enjoined by a national policy to have full disclosure. And these are what some of researchers have done to us, improving government policy that support a lot of our stakeholder activities.
Great. Melanie, you want the floor to make it extraordinarily brief, though.
Comment. The clear message was already mentioned by your Honorable President of Kenya yesterday here. The nuclear development for the people, and it must go with the people. I think that Kenya will be successful in launching its nuclear power program, such a great vision in mind. OECD, NEA is here, France is here, Korea is here, Ghana is here, and US is here. We are rooting out for you, and we are looking forward to more collaborations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll conclude the session. I'll just mention one thing as we close. In Kelly's presentation, she highlighted the need for training, and I agree with that entirely. I think that it's important not to think that you can send your communications people out to solve your public engagement issues. The people who are making decisions, the experts, have to get out there, and that does require some preparation. One of the things that we've been thinking about is we hold a course called Risk Communication Training Course, which actually Patricia has already taken. And I think it would be a good idea to perhaps hold that course here in Kenya. So we'll give some thought to that. With that, let's give this panel a hand. I give the floor to Norman.
Another round of applause for the panelists there. Not in my backyard syndrome. Okay, so I guess you'd want for them to pose for a photo. So you can do that. So as you do that, I would like to make a couple of announcements. If you have not registered, kindly use the tea break to ensure you do that. I also want to request the moderators for the next 2 sessions before the closing ceremony. Kindly, let's keep our presentations for just 1 hour. So the 2 sessions, instead of 1 hour, 30 minutes, would want them to be shortened, which means therefore you'll have to keep your presentations very pithy and punchy, but still communicate the message. Agreed? Very good. So we want to, where is Isola? Yeah, so as they do that, I would also want us to be back here so that then we can start in the next, let's be back to start the next session at 11:30. Is that okay? Yeah? Agreed. Silence means consent. So 11:30, we'd want to start the next session so that we are able to allow for the closing ceremony. And of course, it will not be like yesterday, but be prepared for anything. Okay, so let's take our tea, coffee, and be back to start at 11:30 for those who need to register.
Governance is the backbone of every successful institution. It shapes ethical leadership, drives accountability, and fosters sustainable growth. At the Institute of Certified Secretaries, we champion governance excellence. Our governance standards provide the guiding framework that ensures transparency, integrity, and efficiency in organizations across sectors. The Institute of Certified Secretaries empowers leaders through training, certification, and thought leadership. Our programs equip professionals with the knowledge and skills to uphold good governance practices at every level. Join us for an enriching learning experience that will shape the future of ethical and effective governance.
As the world grapples with the escalating impact of climate change, the need for sustainable solutions has never been more urgent. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and increasing carbon dioxide levels threaten our planet's future.
Governance is the backbone of every successful
Imagine a world where energy and nature are not at odds, but in harmony.
And foster sustainable growth.
At the forefront of combating these global issues is KenGen, East Africa's largest green energy producer, producing 60% of all the energy in Kenya and powering 130 billion light bulbs in the country every hour. KenGen has over 1,600 megawatts of installed renewable energy capacity, enough to power millions of homes, with 826 megawatts in hydropower, 976 megawatts in geothermal power, and 26 megawatts in wind power.
Kenya has a geothermal potential of more than 10,000 megawatts. We have only harnessed about 1,000
escalating impact of climate change.
Between 1995 and today, here at Olkaria, we have an installed capacity.
It took 23 years to actually hack how geothermal wells and geothermal systems are, where we got in 1973 a self-discharging well.
Some of the technologies that have come up over the time,
producing 60% of all the
Governance is the backbone of every successful institution. It shapes ethical leadership, drives accountability, and fosters sustainable growth. At the Institute of Certified Secretaries, we champion governance excellence. Our governance standards provide the guiding framework that ensures transparency, integrity, and efficiency in organizations across sectors. The Institute of Certified Secretaries empowers leaders through training, certification, and thought leadership. Our programs equip professionals with the knowledge and skills to uphold good governance practices at every level. Join us for an enriching learning experience that will shape the future of ethical and effective governance.
As the world grapples with the escalating impact of climate change, the need for sustainable solutions has never been more urgent. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and increasing carbon dioxide levels threaten our planet's future.
Imagine a world where energy and nature are not at odds, but in harmony.
At the forefront of combating these global issues is KenGen, East Africa's largest green energy producer, producing 60% of all the energy in Kenya and powering 130 billion light bulbs in the country every hour. KenGen has over 1,600 megawatts of installed renewable energy capacity, enough to power millions of homes, with 826 megawatts in hydropower, 976 megawatts in geothermal power, and 26 megawatts in wind power.
Kenya has a geothermal potential of more than 10,000 megawatts. We have only harnessed about 1,000 megawatts.
Between 1995 and today, here at Olkaria, we have an installed capacity.
It took 23 years to actually hack how geothermal wells and geothermal systems are, where we got in 1973 a self-discharging well.
some of the technologies that have come up over the time, we have the RigSense that is giving us the real-time data to the supervisor and the driller, and will advise the processes to be taken and actions to be taken.
We have state-of-the-art equipment that are able to image in the order of kilometers up to about 40, 50 kilometers deep into Earth's subsurface.
The power we generate here is per the grid code. We generate power of the right frequency, right voltage and current, such that the end user at the factory or even at home, the equipment that utilizes this power is within the set parameters.
By tapping into geothermal wind and hydropower, KenGen is cutting carbon emissions and ensuring affordable, clean energy for all, driving the nation's commitment to the UN's climate goals.
KenGen has a lot of hydropower generation in the eastern region, Upper Tana and Lower Tana, but we are also looking at other regions in this country. From our strategy that is looking at the next 10 years, we are actually not going to put any power plant that is not green.
The desire to set up the Green Energy Park is to promote stable power that is available 24/7.
Alongside its green energy efforts, KenGen is actively engaged in community development in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Through the KenGen Foundation, the company has partnered with local organizations to conserve biodiversity, increase environmental awareness, and improve access to education for thousands of children across the country.
For the communities, we offer water points whereby they get their water for their domestic use and also for their animals. And we also offer seedlings so that they can plant the trees around the...
You cannot afford
geothermal power.
Behind the remarkable economic growth, there was stable power supply. Behind the global splash of the Korean wave, there was abundant energy. Korea, a country that doesn't produce a drop of oil, could achieve economic growth. Korea hydro and nuclear power made it possible. Dreaming of energy independence without relying on foreign technology. After challenges and commitment, KHNP succeeded in developing Korean nuclear power plants. In the end, Korea has become a nuclear power plant exporting country. From nuclear power to hydropower, pump storage, solar power, wind power, fuel cells, and hydrogen, KHNP has grown into an eco-friendly energy company, producing clean energy that reduces carbon emissions. While humanity faces the challenge of carbon neutrality by 2050, KHNP is developing innovative SMRs and pursuing measures to utilize them in smart net zero cities, preparing for the carbon neutral era as an energy leader. And as a public energy corporation, KHNP contributes to the industrial economy and local communities in Korea. A clean energy leader shaping the way to a carbon neutral era. We are Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. Preparing for the carbon neutral era as an energy leader. And as a public energy corporation, KHNP contributes to the industrial economy and local communities in Korea. Clean energy leader shaping the way to a carbon neutral era. We are Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power.
Our greatest challenge was achieving the impossible. Sheer desperation to win the Czech nuclear bid drove us to embark on a bold and fierce journey. Fighting through day after day, we wrote, rewrote, and refined documents that carried the weight of 400 billion Czech korunas. With the passing of each preliminary round, like a tiny seed blossoming with time, hope slowly began to take root. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power secures Czech nuclear power plant. Miracles are not created in the Czech Republic. Miracles are created through the yearning in our hearts. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. Preliminary round, like a tiny seed blossoming with time, slowly began to take root. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power secures Czech nuclear
Governance is the backbone of every successful institution. It shapes ethical leadership, drives accountability, and fosters sustainable growth. At the Institute of Certified Secretaries, we champion governance excellence. Our governance standards provide the guiding framework that ensures transparency, integrity, and efficiency in organizations across sectors. The Institute of Certified Secretaries empowers leaders through training, certification, and thought leadership. Our programs equip professionals with the knowledge and skills to uphold good governance practices at every level. Join us for an enriching learning experience that will shape the future of ethical and effective governance.
As the world grapples with the escalating impact of climate change, the need for sustainable solutions has never been more urgent. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and increasing carbon dioxide levels threaten our planet's future.
Imagine a world where energy and nature are not at odds, but in harmony.
At the forefront of combating these global issues is KenGen, East Africa's largest green energy producer, producing 60% of all the energy in Kenya and powering 130 billion light bulbs in the country every hour. KenGen has over 1,600 megawatts of installed renewable energy capacity, enough to power millions of homes, with 826 megawatts in hydropower, 976 megawatts in geothermal power, and 26 megawatts in wind power.
Kenya has a geothermal potential of more than 10,000 megawatts. We have only harnessed about 1,000 megawatts.
Between 1985 and today, here at Olkaria, we have an installed capacity.
It took 23 years to actually hack how geothermal wells and geothermal systems are, where we got in 1973 a self-discharging well.
Some of the technologies that have come up over the time, we have the RigSense that is giving us the real-time data to the supervisor and the driller, and will advise the processes to be taken and actions to be taken.
We have state-of-the-art equipment that are able to image in the order of kilometers, up to about 40, 50 kilometers deep into Earth's subsurface.
power we generate here is per the grid code. We generate power of the right frequency, right voltage and current, such that the end user at the factory or even at home, the equipment that utilizes this power is within the set parameters.
By tapping into geothermal wind and hydropower, KenGen is cutting carbon emissions and ensuring affordable, clean energy for all, driving the nation's commitment to the UN's climate goals.
KenGen has a lot of hydropower generation in the eastern region, Upper Tana and Lower Tana, but we are also looking at other regions in this country. From our strategy that is looking at the next 10 years, we are actually not going to put any power plant that is not green.
The desire to set up the Green Energy Park is to promote stable power that is available 24/7.
Alongside its green energy efforts, KenGen is actively engaged in community development in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Through the KenGen Foundation, the company has partnered with local organizations to conserve biodiversity, increase environmental awareness, and improve access to education for thousands of children across the country.
For the communities, we offer water points whereby they get their water for their domestic use and also for their animals. And we also offer seedlings so that they can plant the trees around the schools.
We also do some scholarship provision to the children of the communities. And even besides giving them scholarships, those ones who are successful, when job opportunities arise, we actually give those communities around where we work.
We do what we call environmental awareness in conjunction even with the Ministry of Interior, whereby when they have barasas, we come together and impart the knowledge on environmental conservation.
We work together with the communities. We have serious engagements that we carry out with them so that we walk the journey together. Our focus and our main interest is in the geothermal. What an opportunity to be able to have industries run their operations using 100% green energy. This green energy park is a trailblazer in this region.
Welcome to the KenGen Green Energy Park, where innovation meets sustainability. Spanning over 4,500 acres of pristine land, KenGen Green Energy Park is a masterclass of eco-friendly design and cutting-edge technology. Here, the latest advancement in geothermal comes together to create a thriving ecosystem that's efficient and sustainable. We are onboarding partners who believe in this ideology and doing business responsibly while preserving our planet. The Green Energy Park is powered by 100% geothermal power, an initiative that opens the possibility of going beyond achieving the zero carbon emissions mark to achieving what we call climate positivity and making that a reality. You cannot afford to be left out.
We also do some scholarship provision.
Behind the remarkable economic growth, there was stable power supply. Behind the global splash of the Korean wave, there was abundant energy. Korea, a country that doesn't produce a drop of oil, could achieve economic growth. Korea hydro and nuclear power made it possible. Dreaming of energy independence without relying on foreign technology. After challenges and commitment, KHNP succeeded in developing Korean nuclear power plants. In the end, Korea has become a nuclear power plant exporting country. From nuclear power to hydropower, pump storage, solar power, wind power, fuel cells, and hydrogen, KHNP has grown into an eco-friendly energy company, producing clean energy that reduces carbon emissions. While humanity faces the challenge of carbon neutrality by 2050, KHNP is developing innovative SMRs and pursuing measures to utilize them in smart net zero cities, preparing for the carbon neutral era as an energy leader. And as a public energy corporation, KHNP contributes to the industrial economy and local communities in Korea. A clean energy leader shaping the way to a carbon-neutral era. We are Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power.
Beyond achieving the zero carbon emissions mark to achieving what we call climate.
KHNP is developing innovative SMRs and pursuing measures to utilize them in smart net zero cities, preparing for the carbon neutral era as an energy leader. And as a public
Our greatest challenge was achieving the impossible. Sheer desperation to win the Czech nuclear bid drove us to embark on a bold and fierce journey. Fighting through day after day, we wrote, rewrote, and refined documents that carried the weight of 400 billion Czech korunas. With the passing of each preliminary round, like a tiny seed blossoming with time, hope slowly began to take root.
Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power secures Czech nuclear power plants.
Miracles are not created in the Czech Republic. Miracles are created through the yearning in our hearts. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power.
Governance is the backbone of every successful institution. It shapes ethical leadership, drives accountability, and fosters sustainable growth. At the Institute of Certified Secretaries, we champion governance excellence. Our governance standards provide the guiding framework that ensures transparency, integrity, and efficiency in organizations across sectors. The Institute of Certified Secretaries empowers leaders through training, certification, and thought leadership. Our programs equip professionals with the knowledge and skills to uphold good governance practices at every level. Join us for an enriching learning experience that will shape the future of ethical and effective governance.
As the world grapples with the escalating impact of climate change, the need for sustainable solutions has never been more urgent. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and increasing carbon dioxide levels threaten our planet's future.
Imagine a world where energy and nature are not at odds, but in harmony.
At the forefront of combating these global issues is KenGen, East Africa's largest green energy producer, producing 60% of all the energy in Kenya and powering 130 billion light bulbs in the country every hour. KenGen has over 1,600 megawatts of installed renewable energy capacity, enough to power millions of homes, with 826 megawatts in hydropower, 976 megawatts in geothermal power, and 26 megawatts in wind power.
Kenya has a geothermal potential of more than 10,000 megawatts. We have only harnessed about 1,000 megawatts.
Between 1985 and today, here at Olkaria, we have an installed capacity.
It took 23 years to actually hack how geothermal wells and geothermal systems are, where we got in 1973 a self-discharging well.
Some of the technologies that have come up over the time, we have the RigSense that is giving us the real-time data to the supervisor and the driller, and will advise the processes to be taken and actions to be taken.
We have state-of-the-art equipment that are able to image in the order of kilometers up to about 40, 50 kilometers deep into Earth's subsurface.
The power we generate here is per the grid code. We generate power of the right frequency, right voltage and current, such that the end user at the factory or even at home, the equipment that utilizes this power is within the set parameters.
By tapping into geothermal, wind, and hydropower, KenGen is cutting carbon emissions and ensuring affordable, clean energy for all, driving the nation's commitment to the UN's climate goals.
KenGen has a lot of hydropower generation in the eastern region, Upper Tana and Lower Tana, but we are also looking at other regions in this country. From our strategy that is looking at the next 10 years, we are actually not going to put any power plant that is not green.
The desire to set up the Green Energy Park is to promote stable power that is available 24/7.
Alongside its green energy efforts, KenGen is actively engaged in community development in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Through the KenGen Foundation, the company has partnered with local organizations to conserve biodiversity, increase environmental awareness, and improve access to education for thousands of children across the country.
For the communities, we offer water points whereby they get their water for their domestic use and also for their animals. And we also offer seedlings so that they can plant the trees around the schools.
We also do some scholarship provision to the children of the communities. And even besides giving them scholarships, those ones who are successful, when job opportunities arise, we actually give those communities around where we work.
We do what we call environmental awareness in conjunction even with the Ministry of Interior, whereby when they have barasas, we come together and impart the knowledge on environmental conservation.
We work together with the communities. We have serious engagements that we carry out with them so that we walk the journey together. Our focus and our main interest is in the geothermal. What an opportunity to be able to have industries run their operations using 100% green energy. This green energy park is a trailblazer in this region.
Welcome to the KenGen Green Energy Park, where innovation meets sustainability. Spanning over 4,500 acres of pristine land, KenGen Green Energy Park is a masterclass of eco-friendly design and cutting-edge technology. Here, the latest advancement in geothermal comes together to create a thriving ecosystem that's efficient and sustainable. We are onboarding partners who believe in this ideology and doing business responsibly while preserving our planet. The Green Energy Park is powered by 100% geothermal power, an initiative that opens the possibility of going beyond achieving the zero carbon emissions mark to achieving what we call climate positivity and making that a reality. You cannot afford to be left out.
Behind the remarkable economic growth, there was stable power supply. Behind the global splash of the Korean wave, there was abundant energy. Korea, a country that doesn't produce a drop of oil, could achieve economic growth. Korea hydro and nuclear power made it possible. Dreaming of energy independence without relying on foreign technology. After challenges and commitment, KHNP succeeded in developing Korean nuclear power plants. In the end, Korea has become a nuclear power plant exporting country. From nuclear power to hydropower, pump storage, solar power, wind power, fuel cells, and hydrogen, KHNP has grown into an eco-friendly energy company, producing clean energy that reduces carbon emissions. While humanity faces the challenge of carbon neutrality by 2050, KHNP is developing innovative SMRs and pursuing measures to utilize them in smart net zero cities, preparing for the carbon neutral era as an energy leader. And as a public energy corporation, KHNP contributes to the industrial economy and local communities in Korea. A clean energy leader shaping the way to a carbon neutral era. We are Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power.
And even besides giving them scholarships, those ones who are successful.